is the actual device that controls the behavior of the cell. So how does it work? Well, the receptor picks up a stimulus, right? Say yeah or no, so we go like, yeah. Okay, yeah. And then the output goes through the channel because the channel is closed, and when the signal comes, the channel opens, and then the signal goes down and activates the functions of the cell. So the stimulus is received by the receptor, and the response is produced by the channel or the effector. So when I put that together, what does it mean? It says this. It says stimulus response, that biology is stimulus response, that the inputs, the signals from the environment, are collected by the receptors, and the receptors read the environment, whether they're reading the external environment or the internal environment. But once they receive a signal, I get a response. That's the output. Behavior is a response. So the output is mediated by effectors, such as the channel. So the bottom line is this. Environmental signals elicit behavior. Got it? If I remove the environmental signals, what behavior do I have? None. And this is an interesting point. As I said, I could take the nucleus out of the cell. I don't change the behavior at all. But if I go to the cell and cut off the antennas, the cell has no behavior. Now just think for a second. Stop and just think for the profound meaning of what this says. Then the behavior you're expressing is what? A reflection of the signals that come from the environment. So all of a sudden your behavior is not coming from the inside as much as it's totally a reflection of what you see on the outside. And so that this is changing your life is through this. But this device is what controls the cell. That there are thousands and thousands of these input and output devices controlling the cell. Now, is it clear at least that how this acts as a switch? Say yes or no so I know we're doing okay. Well, now you recognize that each one of these things can activate a function of the cell. Now, this is the beautiful part because I'm going to let you say the words. Is it true or not that the receptor represents awareness of the environment? Okay. Is it true or not that when the channels or whatever the output devices are start to create a physical response, that they create a physical sensation in the cell? Okay, so is this what controls the cell, or at least a function within the cell, yes or no? What is this called? And the answer is, in the dictionary, there is a word for this. And the word is perception. Awareness of the environment through physical sensation. And basically, so you just saw the labeling of what? A device that controls the cell. What is this device that controls the cell? Known as perception. So are you controlled by genes? No. You're controlled by perception. Perception is how you read the environment and adjust your behavior. It makes sense because if your behavior is linked to the environment, then you're coordinated with the environment. If your behavior is not connected to what's going on in the environment, you're out of sync, and that actually is neurological problems in many cases when your behavior doesn't fit the environment. So the point about it is this. Cells started to come together into community. And why this was relevant is each cell is reading what it should do by reading the environment. But when cells start to come together in a community to make a multicellular organism like you or myself, then something has to happen. What's different about the individual versus a community? And it's this. If I'm just a free-living cell, I can walk around and do anything I want, and it doesn't make any difference. But if I join a community, then the word community has meaning. It means communication. It means holding it together. That as an individual cell in the community, I can't do what I want to do. I have to do what the community agrees. That's part of the deal. If I give up my independence, I give it up to join the community. But the reason for joining the community is I've got greater chance of survival with more members all working together. That's what community is all about. That's why people came together to form communities instead of living alone, because community brings greater life. But when I look at that, then here's the important understanding. If a cell doesn't listen to the community's voice, then the cell is not part of the community. Cancer cells have withdrawn from the community. They're still in there, but they're not listening to the voice of the community. They're doing their own thing. Why would some cells get out of the community? And the answer is, why are people homeless? Why are people out of work, or why are people separating? If the community is not supporting them at some point, the cells recognize, my God, what do I want to be in this for? So there's a point that cancer starts to recognize as a result of breakdown of community. Well, let's look at cells moving in community. This is a movement of a bunch of cells, and I'm going to show you the communication using a special dye. I can show you how the cells are communicating in this community. There's a dye that you can see the nervous connection of cells. Now, in this one, the dye lights up. It's a fluorescent dye. Now, you see the sparkling and flashing? That's the neurological process of each individual cell. But watch what happens waves of information start. Why? Because the cells are connected to each other. So the actions of some cells are spreading to other cells. So what you're actually looking at, it's sort of like an electroencephalograph of cells. You're watching cells talking to each other because cells work together in a community. When the community falls apart, that's when disease starts to happen, because that means that they're not, for some reason, they're not being supported, and that will then lead to the end of the community. So the point about it is this. Each cell has a brain. That's a fact. Each cell can read the environment and adjust its function for whatever it sees. But when cells get in a community, they defer their own belief system or their own system of what they're seeing to the central command. So as you can see here, I have a cell here on the right-hand side, marked in purple over here, that this cell is out here in the environment. But what should its function be? Well, the answer is it's going to be coordinated by the brain, because the brain is going to tell all the cells what we should do to work together to provide for the success of my living organism. So the brain gets in between the environment and the cell. The cell no longer reads its own environment. The cell depends on the central nervous system to tell us about the environment. So the bottom line is this. The cell on the right is intelligent. It will always be able to adjust itself to the environment. That's when I was taking cells out of sick people and putting them in culture, they started to get better, because when left alone, they could say, man, I could live comfortably alone without being in that system anymore. And then, so the fact is, so what regulates a cell now? When it's in a community, the cell reads the environment, which is the left side, but it doesn't read it directly. It now reads the environment through the brain, and the brain interprets the environment and then tells the cell what adjustment it should do to live in the environment that it's seen. And the issue is, in general cases, this wouldn't be any big deal. But the issue deals with, what about our perceptions? Because perception is controlling the cell, not the genes. Well, let's ask some simple questions about perceptions. So you can take a test here, because it's a perception test. And the perception test works like this. Very simple question. Is A, the surface area of A, greater than, equal to, or less than the surface area of B? What's your answer? Less. Cool. But that's so easy. Everybody can figure this guy out, because they're nice little square boxes. But what if they're not so square? What if they're irregular shapes? So let's take a look at it this way. Okay, you take this test. I'm going to ask 4 questions, and then I'm going to go over the answers. And the questions are basically the same in each one. Is the one country greater than, equal to, or less than the other? Equal to means approximate, okay? So the point is this. From your perception, and they get easier, because I don't want, everybody to get all the answers wrong, because you'll go home disgruntled. So I make them easier as we go along. The first one, is South America greater than, equal to, or less than Europe in surface area?